Tonight's presentation, security violation. Uh-oh. Our presenter is Mike Bush. Mike is president of Savvy Aviation Incorporated, author for numerous aviation publications, a certified flight instructor, A&P with IA privileges, 2008 FAA's Aviation Maintenance Technician of the Year, a member of EAA. Mike, thanks for being with us. I'm turning control of the presentation over to you.
Well, good evening, Tim, and good evening, everybody. And Tim, you kind of got it pretty right with your "uh-oh" comment. Most of the webinars that I do in this series have to do with aircraft maintenance, and occasionally I do one that has to do with flying. This isn't really either of those. This is a confession. Every so often I screw up, and it always makes me feel better when I share my screw ups with other people in the hopes that maybe they will avoid making the same screw up. I think we have a pretty good tradition in aviation about doing that. But I screwed up. I violated a regulation I didn't even know existed. And I learned a lesson. And the main lesson I learned was that the TSA has no sense of humor. So let me start at the beginning. The story I'm about to tell you occurred on Christmas week, just this last December. And I decided that I was going to spend Christmas with some friends in South Florida, and that I was going to fly my Cessna 310 to South Florida, spend a week with them over Christmas, and then fly home. So it was. I love these long cross countries. I love doing transcontinental type cross countries. Most people think I'm crazy for doing that, but it seems to me if you have an airplane, that's what you should be doing. You should be using it. And so the plan to get to Florida was that I was going to leave crack of dawn on Saturday morning, December 21st, out of my home base of Santa Maria, California. I was going to make a fuel stop at Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is actually a pretty cool airport, which I've been to before. And then I was going to try to make it all the way to Lufkin, Texas. That's right at the eastern edge of Texas, just on the Louisiana border. So I would get basically 2/3 of the trip out of the way the first day. And I would overnight at Lufkin, and then proceed the rest of the way to my ultimate destination of Pompano Beach, Florida. And you sort of have to make a dogleg there, because although I'm flying a twin and I could fly, across, the Gulf of America now, most of that stuff is special use airspace controlled by the military, and so it's kind of hard to do that. So I was going to fly to Marianna, Florida, and then hang a right and land at Pompano Beach. So this plan if I was going to make it to Lufkin by sunset, I needed to leave at Santa Maria very early. So, at any rate, on Saturday, December 21st, I arrived at Santa Maria. SMX is the identifier. I arrived at the security gate at the crack of dawn. It was 5:15 local time, and I used my badge, which is a proximity card, to open the security gate. Drove through it, drove to my hangar, Um, and my plan was to be the Santa Maria Tower's very, very first customer when they opened the tower at 6 a.m. I was in the run-up area at 6 a.m. I had completed my run-up, and when the tower opened, I asked for my clearance, and I was off. So I flew 2 3.5-hour legs to Las Cruces and then to Lufkin. I arrived at Lufkin before sunset. Got out of the airplane, checked my iPhone for messages, and I discovered that there was a missed call that came in while I was airborne, someplace between Las Cruces and Lufkin. And so I played the voicemail message back, and the caller identified himself as Rollo, and that he was an operations officer at Santa Maria Airport. Well, that's interesting. I wonder what Mr. Rollo had for me. So anyway, I listened to the message, and he said, "You were observed committing a gate violation." That did not sound good. And he went on to explain that when I used my badge to open the gate at 5:15 in the morning, the gate failed to close behind me, and I failed to detect that it failed to close behind me, and that Rollo had studied the security camera video, which there's cameras all over the airport, and apparently the videos all goes to his office there at the Santa Maria Airport District Office. And he said a review of the video revealed that the gate remained open for a half hour from the time I opened it at 5:15 in the morning. And I was the only soul on the airport. I swear there wasn't anybody else there at that hour. Until it was finally detected by an airport maintenance guy, and he corrected the problem and closed the gate. So this security gate was open for a half hour. And of course, it was my responsibility to detect and report the stuck gate. And I'm always pretty conscientious of driving through and then stopping and watching in my rearview mirror to watch to make sure the gate's closing before I proceed, and that nobody's tailgating me through there. And in fact, one time somebody did tailgate me through the gate, and I called the airport office and reported it like I'm supposed to. But it was 5:15 in the morning. It was pitch black. I drove through the gate. I looked in my rearview mirror. I couldn't see anything. It was just pitch blackness. So I assumed that the gate would close behind me. It always had in the, I don't know, almost 30 years that I've been based at this airport. And it really never occurred to me that what I was looking for is to make sure nobody tailgated in behind me. It never really occurred to me that the gate was not going to close. Not making an excuse, just sort of explaining how it happened. But at any rate, Rollo subsequently sent me a very formal-looking email to supplement his voicemail, and indicated that I was in violation of something called 49 CFR 1540.105. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as 49 CFR, but apparently 49 CFR are some Department of Transportation regulations, and 1540.105 is entitled Security Responsibility of Employees and Other Persons. And I was an other person, and I had security responsibilities, and I defaulted on them by not noticing that the gate closed behind me. Now, fortunately for me, very fortunately for me, it turns out, the examination of this video determined that no one else came through that stuck open gate in the half hour that it was stuck open from the time I opened it to the time the airport maintenance person detected that it was open and fixed it. Because if some unauthorized person had gone through the gate, I would have been in a world of hurt. And I will talk about that a little bit more a bit later. But at any rate, I was really lucky that nobody came in. And like I said, when I got to the airport at 5:15 in the morning, there was not a soul around. It was completely black and dead. At any rate, Rollo's message explained that because of my violation, my badge had been deactivated. And so when I returned from my trip to Florida a week later, I was going to be imprisoned on airport property. I would not be able to open the gate to get out because at Santa Maria, it requires a badge with a proximity badge, both to get in a gate and also to get out the gate. And they do that. Always struck me as kind of weird why you needed a badge to get off the airport property, but there is a good reason, because it allows them to have a computer audit trail of everyone who comes in and everyone who goes out. And so in any case, you can't get off the airport without a valid badge. And in fact, one time, some years ago, I flew to Oshkosh for AirVenture, and when I came back from AirVenture, I discovered I couldn't get off the airport, and it turned out that I had let the expiration date on my badge had expired while I was at AirVenture. So I had to holler for help to get that situation resolved. That was some years back. But at any rate, in this case, my access badge had been deactivated because of my security violation, and I would be not able to get off the airport when I got back from my trip. And so Rollo explained that I would need to arrange to be escorted off the airport by an airport employee. And he warned me against, he said, don't even think about trying to get, an airport friend of yours or something to let you out. You absolutely positively will need to be escorted off the airport by an airport employee. And once you are escorted off the airport by an airport employee, you will not be allowed to come back until you come in for remedial training, remedial security training at the airport office. So at any rate, this is not exactly the Christmas present that I was hoping to get, but this is what happened. So I found this out, when I got to Lufkin, Texas. Anyway, I continued the trip and got to Florida. Had a wonderful time in South Florida over Christmas. And then on Saturday, December 28th, I started my trip home. And my first stop, I took a little bit of a detour. My first stop was Jackson, Tennessee, where my colleague and good friend Paul New and his wife Helen live. And I got to spend the afternoon and evening and overnight with Paul and his wife, and got to be involved in some of Paul's misadventures. Well, for example, he was called out to change a wheel assembly on a Embraer 145 airliner in a rainstorm that night. And I was out there sort of kibitzing while this was all going on. It was sort of fun. But at any rate, so that Saturday I spent the afternoon and evening with Paul in Jackson, Tennessee, and then Sunday morning, my plan was to fly to from Jackson to Dumas, Texas, for fuel, and then to fly home to Santa Maria. So I was flying to Dumas, Texas, and as I was crossing Oklahoma, it dawned on me that I was passing in fairly close proximity to another good friend of mine, George Brawley, of Gammy and Tornado Alley fame. So I actually called George from my cell phone in the air and said, "Hey, George, I'm 15 minutes from Tulsa. What are you doing for lunch?" And he said, "I don't have any lunch plans." And so I decided to divert and meet up with him at Ada, Oklahoma, and had a nice long 2.5 hour lunch with George. And again, this is the sort of thing that's just the joy of traveling cross country in a GA airplane, because you get to stop wherever you want to, and you can visit with friends, and I just love that kind of stuff. But at any rate, after my 2.5 hour lunch with George, I proceeded to, as planned, to Dumas. But by the time I got to Dumas, it was late in the afternoon, and I was kind of tired and decided, instead of trying to press on home, I would just call it a day, and checked into the Holiday Inn Express in beautiful downtown Dumas, Texas. And I don't mean to make fun of it, because it's just as nice as any other Holiday Inn Express. It was fine. So then the next day, I took off from Dumas. This was now Monday, and I also figured it would be easier to get an airport employee to escort me off the airport if I arrived on a Monday instead of a Sunday. So that was also part of my decision to stay overnight in Dumas. So the next day, I flew to Winslow, Arizona, historic Winslow, Arizona, for a fuel stop, and then flew the rest of the way to Santa Maria, and got to Santa Maria about 2 in the afternoon. So I put my airplane in the hangar. I transferred all of my luggage and Christmas presents and all sorts of stuff into my car. And then I called the airport office to arrange for an escort through the security gate. I figured some uniformed security person would be coming out. But in fact, the person who came out to escort me was what turned out to be the airport maintenance foreman, nicest guy in the world. And so I wound up bending his ear for a while, trying to get him to explain to me why this gate didn't close when I drove through it that a week ago. And uh, uh, um, and he explained to me that the airport gates use an infrared beam to detect the presence of people or vehicles in the gate transom, and to inhibit them from closing if anybody is breaking the beam. And he said these optical beams give them no end of trouble. That if some condensation forms on the lens, or a spider spins a web in a bad place, or all sorts of other possible things, it can interfere with the beam and fool the gate into thinking that there's some obstruction in the transom, and prevent the gate from closing. I had no idea that there was an infrared beam, and because it's invisible, of course, and that it was a problematic thing, because the gate had always closed behind me innumerable times over decades that I have been an airport tenant. So at any rate, I had that nice conversation with him, and he opened the gate for me, and I drove home. But before I drove home, I called the airport office because I wanted to make an appointment to come in for my remedial training, and I made an appointment for the next morning, Tuesday morning. So let me tell you a little bit about my remedial security training. So I showed up bright and early Tuesday morning at 0900 when the airport office opens, and I presented myself and said that I was the scofflaw that was in for remedial security training. And I expected that I would be getting a dressing down from Rollo, but it turned out that Rollo was on vacation, and so my instructor turned out to be Rollo's boss, a fellow by the name of Rick, who is the chief operations officer for Santa Maria Public Airport. And Rick and I spent over an hour together going through this remedial training. Rick turned out to be, again, a really nice guy. And the hour that I spent with him was quite educational and quite enjoyable as well. It was not, it was not what I feared it would be, which would be an uncomfortable experience. It was actually a great experience, and I'm kind of glad it happened. So Rick started right off the bat explaining to me that he hated all of this security garbage just as much as I did, but that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place about it, because Santa Maria, although it's 99 and 44th% a general aviation airport, has the misfortune of having a little bit of airline service. In fact, Allegiant Airline flies 2 flights a week. I think it's Mondays and Thursdays or something like that, to Las Vegas. And because of this, two flights a week of airline service to this airport, it puts the airport in a category where it's subject to all sorts of security rules from the TSA. But by the way, does anybody know what TSA stands for? I've had several suggestions, but I have always wished it would go away. When TSA was formed, I kind of came to the conclusion that the terrorist had won and we had lost or something. At any rate, that be that as it may, Rick explained that the TSA was constantly giving him a hard time. They would send Tiger teams to Santa Maria to audit the security without notice. And when they came to look at security, they were never satisfied with it. The airport had put in all these gates and fences and badges for all the airport tenants, and cameras all over the airport, and patrol cars running around. But it was never enough, and it was pretty clear to Rick that what TSA really wanted was to have uniformed guards with sidearms posted at every access gate on the airport 24/7. Rick would push back on that, and it was a struggle between TSA wanting more security and Rick wanting to keep things real. And Rick's argument to the TSA was we didn't need armed guards at every gate, because we had all these highly responsible airport tenants that had badges and that would report any security breach, like somebody tailgating in that wasn't supposed to and stuff, and that was sort of true. And effectively that all of the airport tenants like me were sort of deputized to maintain airport security. That was their argument to the TSA, which sort of explains why when when one of the airport attendants does screw up the way I did, that they have to take it very seriously. And anytime there's any sort of a security problem, they do have to report it to the TSA. So, he was basically saying, I feel your pain. I have problems with the TSA every day, and don't feel bad. You're not the first person to have this happen, but you're pretty lucky that nobody came in through the gate while it was stuck open. So he then proceeded to go through a PowerPoint presentation with me, going over all of the various airport rules about badges and gates and movement versus non-movement areas and what you're allowed to do with vehicles and all sorts of stuff. It was actually moderately interesting, especially because he was doing it, in a very good-hearted way. And after he went through that, and this was probably the part of the remedial training that really made an impression on me. He told me a couple of eye-opening stories to help me understand just how little sense of humor TSA has about security violations at Santa Maria Airport. One of the stories he told me was about a transient pilot who flew into Santa Maria in some kind of a Cessna, parked on the transient ramp, opened his baggage compartment, got out a folding bicycle, and used it to ride from the airport to a nearby restaurant for a bite to eat. And when the fellow came back to the airport after he had eaten, he saw a car going through one of the security gates, and he decided that he would take advantage of that and ride his bicycle in through the gate behind the car. Unfortunately for him, the car that he decided to tailgate behind was an airport employee's car. So of course his tailgating on the bicycle got immediately reported to the airport. And the airport was obligated to report it to the TSA, and the TSA proceeded to slap him with a $14,000 fine for tailgating through the gate on his folding bicycle. I believe that after he fell on his sword and promised he would never ever do it again, I think they cut it down to $7,000, but it was still a remarkably large fine for what seemed like a fairly minor infraction to me, but apparently didn't seem that minor to TSA. He told me another story that was even worse, and it was a case of a guy who showed up at the airport to go flying with his, I don't know, his wife or girlfriend and a couple of small kids. And he wound up climbing over the fence and then opening one of the man type gates from the inside so that the woman and the two kids could walk in, and they proceeded to go out to an airplane and get in and take off. This was all caught, on video, and the airport was required to report it to the TSA office. And Rick said that when they first reported this to the TSA office and explained that this guy had climbed over the gate or over the fence and then let three other people in, TSA was ready to scramble fighters to intercept this guy. And Rick said, that might be just a little bit of going overboard, because there's a woman and two little kids in the airplane, and if you intercept them with fighters, it's probably going to scare the hell out of the kids. So ultimately, the TSA agreed that instead of intercepting the aircraft, they would meet it upon its arrival with a contingent of uniformed and armed TSA officials who took the pilot into custody for a period of several hours and then hit him with a fine for $25,000 for this infraction. So, you know, I was very impressed by their lack of sense of humor about these things, and it never occurred to me that something like this would be taken as seriously as it is at a GA airport in a kind of a semi-rural area. But it is what it is, and that's the world. So it was pretty eye-opening remedial training for me. Finally, Rick gave me a compulsory quiz, a 5-question quiz about airport rules and regulations. Fortunately, I answered all 5 questions correctly, whereupon he said that I needed to pay a $100 reinstatement fee. They took credit cards. And I actually considered the $100 reinstatement fee eminently reasonable, considering that Rick had spent more than an hour with me on this. Not to mention that Rollo, who was now on vacation, had probably spent a good 2 hours reviewing the video and sending me all of the information and talking to me on the phone and stuff. So it seemed to me that $100 was a small price to pay for all the trouble that I put them to by doing the stupid thing that I did. Whereupon Rick went over to a laptop computer and hit a couple of keys and said, "Okay, your badge is reinstated. You're good to go." And that was the end of my training. I got off easily, as I said, because first of all, I was a first-time offender, and they're not as hard on first-time offenders. And second of all, the really big thing was that I was lucky enough that even though the gate had been stuck open for a half an hour, there was no unauthorized entry through the gate. The video showed that no one else had gone through that open gate from the time I opened it to the time the maintenance guy found it open and fixed it. And Rick had explained to me that a second violation would result in me being locked out of the airport for a week. And a third violation would result in permanent revocation of my access privileges, which probably would also mean that I would have to give up my hangar and find some other airport to keep my airplane at. Not to worry, it's not going to happen again. And if I can't see the gate clearly closing in my rearview mirror, I'm going to darn well get out of the car, walk over to it, or turn the car around and point the headlights at the gate or something to make absolutely sure it doesn't stick open. Because I now am aware, first of all, that gates sometimes don't close properly, and second of all, that the TSA has no sense of humor about these things. And just to underscore that lesson, a few days later, after my remedial training, I got this letter in the mail from the TSA, a warning notice that was very harshly worded and basically said, "We have a file on you now, so watch it, Buster." And so I definitely do not want to tangle with them ever again. So that's pretty much the story. Thanks for listening. I feel totally rehabilitated now and much better that I've confessed my sins. And I would be happy to hear any anecdotes that any of you have had with security at GA airports or anything else you want to talk about.
Well, thanks, Mike. Appreciate you sharing and confessing. But there is a good lesson there, making sure that gate is closed. Gee,
Oh, there sure is.
So many of us, I'm sure, started going to the airport before they were gates and fences and never thought twice about that sort of thing. And since we have all these gates and fences and security, and it's really, you couldn't have said it more eloquently. It's deadly serious, and they don't have any sense of humor at all about it.
That's right. And I had
Right.
no idea that they would levy fines of that sort of magnitude, five-figure fines. But
That's good for all of us
apparently
to
that's
hear.
yeah. Well, that's why I thought it would be good to tell the story.
There's a lot of people who kind of gave their own little story about, their little situations and what they think the TSA might really stand for, but we're not going to get into those things.
Oh, you'll send me a PM on all of those.
Yeah, you'll get the report. So a real question from Jim. Jim wonders, was there ever any initial training on airport security when you first started hangaring your plane at the airport?
There wasn't. There was. I know. I remember when I initially got my access badge, I was given several sheets of paper of rules and regulations in 6-point type or something, which I sort of skimmed, but didn't pay a whole lot of attention to be honest with you. It certainly wasn't a PowerPoint presentation in a sit-down setting and somebody saying, and by the way, if you screw up, you might be fined $25,000. It did not get my attention, but the remedial training sure got my attention.
Sean wonders, when the gate closes behind you, I wonder what type of confirmation is given to you that the gate is really closed.
No confirmation. It's just a visual thing. You just have to you're supposed to watch and make sure that it closes, and then that nobody sneaks in behind you. And to be honest, and of course I've done this hundreds of times now. Every time I go to my airplane, it's probably many hundreds of times. But what my mindset was that what was really important was to make sure nobody snuck in behind me. Verifying that the gate operator didn't fail was not really on my radar screen because it had never happened before. And nobody had said, oh, by the way, these gate operators, they're kind of flaky and sometimes they don't close. It never dawned on me that could happen. So at 5:15 in the morning, when I hadn't really had my first cup of coffee or anything yet, I wasn't as attentive as I should have been.
Brian asked an interesting question. How do we know which airports have TSA rules?
Well, of course, they all have TSA rules, but the question is, what are the rules? And if the airport does not have airline service, then the rules are very relaxed. And like when I refueled at Dumas, Texas, there weren't any gates. You could wander in and off the airport as you saw fit. It was totally. There really was basically no security at all. But the fact that Allegiant flies 2 flights a week into Santa Maria basically changes everything dramatically. It's the presence of airline service apparently that really makes a huge difference. And you couldn't really have very much less airline service than Santa Maria does.
Right.
But it's not zero. It's just slightly more than zero.
Ellie wonders, what do you do if the gate is already stuck open And you want to go to your hangar.
Well, I asked that exact question. I said to Rick, I said, it's 5:15 in the morning. There's not another soul on the airport. There's nobody in the airport office. There's nobody in the tower. What am I supposed to do if this happens at 5:15 in the morning? And he said, you call the airport district office number. It will roll over to an answering service. You tell the answering service that you've got a security problem, and then they have everybody's private number, and they'll try to get they'll try to wake somebody up to come deal with it. But apparently you're supposed to stand guard or something until somebody comes.
Well,
And
that's what,
again, I nobody had ever told me that the airport office had an answering service when the office was closed or anything. This was all new to me, and I mean, it was good information. It's just, I was completely baffled as to what one would do if you had a problem with security, at a weird hour like that. And so I did ask the question, and Rick answered it.
well, Gary says, yeah, thanks for sharing, Mike. At my local airport, we had a similar system. And he said, I was stuck at the gate last month for 30 minutes because the gate wouldn't close. I had to call security. I was scared to move. And I'm now glad that I didn't move, is what Gary said. So
If I had been on my toes, I would have been in the same situation. I would have been, standing guard at the gate, blocking it with my vehicle or something, and hoping somebody would come. And whoever the somebody was would probably be really grumpy when they showed up because I woke them up at 5:15 in the morning.
Right. I wonder if you called the local, like police or sheriff or something like that, whoever had the jurisdiction, maybe.
Well, I
maybe they
asked
could
him
pull security
specifically
duty
about
then.
that. I said, should I call the police or the fire department or something? And he said, no, call the airport office. We have a protocol for that.
Yeah.
But this was the first I knew of it, and I suspect, most of the airport tenants have no idea unless they happen to be listening to this webinar.
Drew says when he goes in the morning, he says illuminating his brake lights sometimes helps to see the gate if it was not in motion or in motion.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea.
Oh, Derek says, was this public admission part of your rehabilitation or punishment?
It was actually voluntary. It was just because confession is good for the soul, and because it's also a great tradition among aviators to confess their sins.
Absolutely.
To fellow aviators, never to authorities.
Well, we've all learned, I mean, gosh, this whole security thing, we joke about it, right? But in the reality of it is that it's not a joking matter. It's deadly serious, and the people in charge are not joking.
Well, the people in charge certainly take it deadly seriously.
Oh my goodness.
That's for sure.
Well, we got a lot of stories that have come in here, but not a lot of questions. I don't think we can add to the discussion.
Are there anybody else willing to confess to being a violator of 49 CFR, whatever the heck it is?
Yeah, well, let's see here. One fellow said he Larry says, you don't want to go over the fence at Bakersfield just because the gate card didn't work either. Don't ask how I know.
Right.
So there you are. You're locked out. You can't get into the airport.
Still has the barbed wire scars to prove it too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So yeah,
now, Bakersfield actually has a little more airline service than Santa Maria does.
Yeah. So, and again, several people keep asking this question, but okay. You arrive to the airport, the gate's already open. What should you do?
Probably call it in.
Call it
Yeah,
in,
I
right?
mean,
Because it's
it,
unsecured gate and you're the one, if you're going to go
and
through it, you can't just go through it and let it be
it's,
open. You got to do
it's like
something.
I think all of the airport tenants that have badges are basically deputy TSA people, or
Hmm.
they're sort of considered to be deputized to enforce airport security. So I think anytime you see a security problem, you're supposed to report it. And
And
you
it's
know,
just,
I actually even thought about this GA Secure hot 1-800 GA Secure hotline, where there's a national security hotline for general aviation. But of course, you know, they couldn't deal with a stuck open gate operator. That you know, what are they going to do? They don't know Rick's home, you know, cell phone number or anything.
yeah.
So, but I suspect every airport has some sort of protocol for dealing with stuff like that. It's just that I think probably most airport tenants don't know what the protocol is, and I wouldn't have known what it was, and unless I had done a bad and gone through this remedial training.
Yeah, great point. And it's easy to kind of, think negatively of this situation, but I think we got to turn it around too as an airport tenant and aircraft there. It's like our neighborhood watch program at your home, right? You don't want bad operators to sneak in there and start
Yeah.
breaking into hangars and doing damage or theft. I mean, that's horrible. None
Hmm.
of us want that for ourselves or our neighbors at the airport. So it's a neighborhood watch type thing. We're
Yeah.
responsible for the security of that area as well. Like you said, we're deputized. So I think if we all think about it that way, we can come down off of the government is overreaching type, argument that we
Yeah.
all go to. But Mike, that's all we got for questions, I think here. A lot of people, like I said, are kind of giving us their opinion and commentary also. We're not going to get into that tonight though. So
Yeah.
take a
A,
moment and share your closing comments.
a bunch of don't ask me how I know this comments, huh?
Mm.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed my confession, my storytelling. If you're not already on my email list, and I send out a monthly newsletter, and then often other stuff as well, and you want to be on my email list, the easiest way to do that is to text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777, and it'll ask you for your name and email address and add you to the to our email distribution. We've got something over 40,000 people that we send the newsletter out to. Um, my 4 books are still available. All of the good places that fine books are sold: EAA Bookstore, and Aircraft Spruce, and Amazon, and they're also all available in audiobook form that you can get on Audible. And actually this morning just did the recording session for our Ask the A&Ps podcast. There's a new version of the podcast that went up on May 1st, and we do it it's twice a month. It comes up on the 1st and 15th of each month, and it's I do the podcast with my colleagues Colleen Sterling and Paul New, and we take call-in questions from aircraft owners, maintenance questions that have their mechanics stumped, and we do our best to come up with answers, and we try to have some fun doing it. So you're welcome to tune in, and you're even more welcome to submit questions and participate in the show. I am going to be. I normally do these webinars on the first Wednesday of every month, but the first Wednesday of next month, I'm going to hopefully be in Geneva, Switzerland. So I asked Tim for dispensation to skip the June webinar, and he was kind enough to grant that. So I didn't have to do it from Geneva at midnight or whatever it would turn out to be. So the next webinar, I've got some pretty interesting ones coming up. The July webinar on July 2nd. It's called Borescope Initiative 1 year later. I did a webinar a while ago about the Savvy Borescope Initiative that we launched the first of the year 2024. And now we have had well over 100,000 borescope images loaded to our platform. Nobody's ever collected 100,000 borescope images before, for at least for piston GA, and we've learned a lot of stuff from this 100,000 images that I will share with you in the webinar. But some really interesting stuff that should have some effect on how aircraft owners inspect and maintain their piston engines. We also have enough that 100,000 images. I'm sure it's over 100,000 now. Is enough that we've actually made some really good progress in training basically an AI discriminator that can now look at borescope images of exhaust valves and detect which ones are burned and which ones aren't. We tried this about 6 months ago. It didn't work really well. We decided we didn't have enough training data. We tried it more recently, and it actually did a surprisingly good job. It detected seriously burned exhaust valves with almost perfect accuracy. Little less than perfect accuracy on exhaust valves that were in the very earliest stages of burning, and because that's much more subtle. But we're convinced that as we get more and more of the data, the AI discriminator will be smarter and smarter, and hopefully we'll be able to create an automated service where you can upload borescope images and it can interpret them for you, which would be really pretty cool. Any rate, going on to August, I'm going to give you a pretty exciting update on our project Gadfly, which I did a webinar about a year and a half ago on it when we first started this effort. But Gadfly is another AI project that we've been working on, which looks not at borescope images, but at digital engine monitor data. And the purpose was to create a generalized anomaly detector model that could look at engine monitor data and detect when something wasn't right, when something was anomalous with the engine. It's a very interesting challenge, and I'll tell you a little bit how we did it in the webinar. But we now have it working very well. For the pilot aircraft for this project was the Cirrus SR-22, and we're now running every SR-22 flight that's uploaded to our platform through the Gadfly model, and we're about to start expanding the model to the AI to handle other aircraft makes and models for which we have enough training data. So we'll do turbocharged Cirruses, we'll do Bonanzas and 210s, and maybe some RVs and stuff, because we have an awful lot of RV data in the system. But makes and models that we've got lots of flights. We have, I want to say, 7 or 8 million GA flights now uploaded to our platform. We started doing this in 2010, so we've been gathering data for about 15 years. And again, nobody's ever put together a collection of, 6-7 million flights worth of GA data before. But when you have that much data, you can start doing some really interesting stuff with AI. So we did some less ambitious things some years ago. We have this thing called FEVA that is a failing exhaust valve anomaly detector based on engine monitor data, and we've been doing that for quite some time. But Gadfly is a much more ambitious and much more general thing where it looks for any sort of problem, not just burned exhaust valves, but basically anything that seems wrong. And how we did that is an interesting story in itself, but it seems to be working pretty well now. And I'm kind of excited about it. And finally, in September, I'm going to do a webinar called Ready, Fire, Aim, which was actually the one that I had planned to do in June before I realized I was going to be abroad. And it talks about maintenance and the importance of doing things in the right order. We see an awful lot of maintenance done where things are not done in the proper order, and the outcome becomes less than is desirable. So that's what we'll be talking about in September. And that's about all I have. Looking forward to doing the July and August webinars, and then of course going to Oshkosh.
Thanks, Mike. Great presentation, and really appreciate you sharing. There's a thought here from Jerry that he expressed, and I think it's a good one for everybody. It's a training issue. Thanks for sharing, Mike. I'm going to contact our airport commission and suggest they discuss this subject at the upcoming EAA chapter meeting.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. Yeah. If when I first became an airport tenant, if somebody had said, oh, by the way, these gates don't always close, and if they get stuck open, you could be hit with a $25,000 fine. That would have made an impression on me, but nobody ever did that.
Well, we did tonight, so yeah, there you go. Everybody got their impression tonight, I hope. So thanks, Mike. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing, and looking forward to next month. Thank you so much. And to everybody who tuned in, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure that gate's closed.
You bet. Good night, everybody.